InPACT stands for interrupting prolonged sitting with activity. And I think we can all attest to the fact that, especially since No Child Left Behind came in the early 2000s, students are spending way too much time sitting. And there are significant short-term and long-term health effects. And so, and it also hurts their ability to learn. And so our goal for this session is for you to be able to go back to your school campuses and talk with your individual teaching staffs on, first of all, the importance of physical activity, and then secondly, how to implement our InPACT program, which is essentially getting kids up and moving, using purposeful movement to re-engage the brain in the learning process, purposeful movement. And so my name is Ransier. I'm the Curriculum and Training Coordinator for Project Healthy Schools, and I would like to introduce you to Dr. Rebecca Hasson from University of Michigan's School of Kinesiology, and the way this partnership came about, as our theme today is partnerships. I was new to Project Healthy Schools a few years back and saw in our university newspaper an article about active classrooms. I said, oh, wonderful. And so I started reading it, and it talked a lot about lab-based physical activity and how beneficial it was to students. And so I contacted Dr. Hasson and said, this does not belong in a lab, it belongs in our schools. And so we've been working together for the last couple of years, implementing the InPACT program. We've learned a lot along the way. But before we talk too much about InPACT and the program itself, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Rebecca Hasson.
Well, thank you for having me here today. Just to give you a little background before I bring Ben back up here, because really this is the Ben and Becca show, we always present together, that this project really actually got started not in the School of Kinesiology, but from a bunch of architects. There were architects at Michigan who were very much interested in understanding how can we design spaces, particularly in schools, that will allow for kids to move more. And so they needed an expert in exercise science, exercise physiology, and so they contacted me. And the first 6 months of the project, we were just trying to figure out how to speak each other's language. And so we were trying to figure out, well, I would ask them, how much physical activity do you want the kids to do? The architects would ask me, well, how much should they do? How much can we get in the classroom? So really trying to do our homework to figure out what is feasible for schools and what is feasible for little kids. Because we know little kids, if you give them free space, they'll just run around for hours and hours and hours. But when you have the constraints of a school classroom and a learning environment, how can we best, most effectively and efficiently infuse physical activity into schools, particularly in the classrooms? So we started working together, and so that's how we first started working in the laboratory. We looked at the interrupting prolonged sitting literature that's saying that all this sitting we're doing, it's very bad for academic performance, it's bad for cardiovascular disease, it's bad for obesity, and if we just give these small little bursts throughout the day in the classroom, can we reverse some of those trends or some of those negative effects? We also know just behavior-wise, kids just don't want to sit down for long periods of time. So can we use constructive ways of increasing movement in the classroom to really enhance both movement and learning in that environment? So that's when we started doing, which I'll show you a little bit, what some of our laboratory results demonstrated, and then what we found in actual schools when we tested this. And so that's how, after we finished our lab-based studies, that's when Ben said, hey, let's put this in the schools. And so Ben is Mr. Yesterday. Let's put this in the schools yesterday. And I'm like, Ben, I'm Mrs. Put this in the school 2 weeks from now because I need to do a lot of homework. Wait, I don't think we're ready, but I'm glad that he pushed this forward because we have learned a ton in terms of, you know, what children like to do, what they don't like to do. As you all know, spoiler alerts, kids like to move. And, you know, it's really the structural constraints that are preventing them from moving. So what can we do as researchers, as educators, to help remove some of those barriers, foster social cohesion in the classroom so that kids will move more and learn more?
So this is from Nike's Design to Move campaign. It says the world to stop moving. Today's children are the first generation to have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. First generation, this always gets the crowd. And if this doesn't, I don't know what would. First generation, so as we all know, life expectancy has gone up and up and up and up and up until now. What are some of the reasons? Why is that true? Why do you think that's true? Why is now life expectancy going the reverse direction? Why do you think that is? Technology? What effect does technology have?
Screens and technology are different things.
Screens equals more sitting, right? Inactivity. Food systems have changed a little bit, right?
And environments aren't as safe. They can't just go ride their bikes for miles on end.
Sure. Environmental changes. So here's a graphic, the compounding effects of physical activity, inactivity over a lifetime. Currently, a little bit over 30% of our school-age children are overweight or obese, which means they miss more school time. Okay? Lower fitness is associated with lower test scores. The state of California has done a ton of work, ton of research on fitness levels and the associated test scores, and they see that the more fit kids are, the better they perform on fitness testing, the higher their academic achievement scores are as well. Down the road, this leads to less earnings of work throughout their working years, higher healthcare costs, 1 week a year of extra sick days taken, so less productivity. And so there's been a big battle in the legislation over the last year or so on that topic. For our high school health teachers, the state is trying to remove the health education credit in high school and replace it with my OSHA training. So like how to use a ladder and how to use a fire extinguisher, and the legislator's mind is equivalent to learning about acute and chronic disease. It's baffling. And so we'll probably see the 1 week go up if that legislation takes place or goes into effect. 5.3 million premature deaths a year due to physical inactivity. So we can see there are a lot of compounding effects here of physical inactivity over the course of your life. And so in schools, kids are sitting longer, and so it's what we aim to do is try to infuse short bouts of physical activity to improve health outcomes long term, but also improve academic achievement. So despite these concerns, we find in legislation that PE is continually, minutes are being removed in place of more sitting time. I guess people feel that the more their kids are in their seat, the more they'll learn. Raise your hand if you think that's true, because I do not. Our argument is for learning time. We argue that learning time is much more important than instructional time. Because the teacher is standing in front of the class, does that mean the kids are learning? No, not at all, right? They're twiddling their thumbs, they're staring into space, they're worried about what the kid in the hallway just told them. And so this is an argument for learning time. We are using purposeful movement to once again re-engage the brain in the learning process. And some research says that about 1 minute per age. So if I'm a 12-year-old, that my brain will start to shut down in as little as 12 minutes of sitting. And so our program gets them up, gets them moving, short bouts to get the glucose going back, neurotransmitters released in the brain to re-engage their brain in the learning process. I remember as a teacher many moons ago, we talk about levels of engagement all the time for administrators in the room. That's one of their hot topic areas, engagement, student engagement. And I remember hearing in the training that we should be seeking feedback from students as little as every minute, just to once again keep them focused. And physical activity also has a big impact on that. So active school days. So here are some of the ways that we try to keep students active throughout the course of their school day. Active learning, kinesthetic learning, active playgrounds. There was a question on our note card about recess. Recess is being cut. And the question was, and I think it's a good time to bring it up, even parents don't buy into the benefits of recess and understand playtime, much less administrators and legislators. How do we reverse this trend? Should we reverse this trend? So we are starting to see that, recess is going away. In fact, a lot of our middle schools, if you're a middle school and you do not have recess at all, raise your hand. A lot of our middle schools, most of our middle schools don't have recess at all. All right. Is recess important? Yeah, especially if it's structured, especially if it's active playgrounds. We unfortunately do see a lot of schools that do have recess and it's an unstructured time. A lot of the kids, especially the female students, will just go and sit and chat with their friends. The boys are up a little bit more active. And so it's our job to make sure that those playgrounds are in fact active, where they do see the benefits of physical activity and not just continuing to go outside and sit. Active transport, physical activity breaks is our focus, active hallways, and active classrooms. As we've talked about, active kids learn better, and here's a nice graphic. Raise your hand if you've seen this graphic already in the past. Hopefully many of us have. Now you all have. So here, after 20 minutes of sitting quietly. So a lot of our middle schools now have long instructional blocks. So after 20 minutes, this is what their brain activity looks like. Very small, very localized. 20 minutes of walking. So infusing physical activity. You can see which brain do you want in your classroom. Benefit of physical activity. All right, test scores go up, grades go up. A lot of benefits to keeping kids active throughout their school day. All right, Take 10. So here's a similar type program, 10 minutes of classroom-based physical activity. Raise your hand if you've heard of Take 10. It's a national program. Right? 40 activities per grade level, 50,000 classrooms in the U.S. using Take 10. Can we do better? Can we get more than just 10 minutes? Is 10 minutes enough? If we think of an 8-hour school day, 10 minutes of classroom-based physical activity. When we saw that brain, just after 20 short minutes, we want more. We're aiming for more. Can we reduce prolonged sitting? Can we interrupt those long physical or instructional blocks? Can we simultaneously increase physical activity and reduce sitting in the classrooms? So can we do both?
So what we found in the classroom, those were the questions that we were trying to address, was really focusing on, can we actually reduce sitting time? But before we go to the schools, there was a lot of questions that we need to ask first. So for instance, we know that in adults, when we increase our physical activity, we usually tend to go home and be couch potatoes. So what we didn't want is for the kids to be very active, and then when they go home, they're just sitting around watching more and more, using more screen time or accumulating more screen time. Another question we were interested in as childhood obesity researchers is, if we increase physical activity, will the kids eat back all of those calories in the cafeteria or later when they go home at nighttime? We know as adults we always, well not always, but 99.9% of the time, we reward ourselves with food. So we go to the gym and say, great, now I can have that cookie, now I can have that candy bar at dinner. And that's what we did not want to see in children. Children are different than adults, but we needed to demonstrate that these wouldn't occur. Also, will the kids enjoy the physical activity? So if we're doing just 2-minute bursts of activity, will they do it? Can we get them up? Can we get them down? And then the teachers are most important. What they really care about is, will this affect learning? And so will we see improvements or decrements in math performance as a function of doing some of these activity breaks? So what we did is we brought 40 kids into the laboratory. About 39 of them were able to finish the study, and these parents loved us because for almost a whole year we brought in the kids into the lab every Saturday for about 8 hours a day. So about 32 hours of babysitting they got for free, and actually we paid them, so the parents loved us. So they had free Saturdays. And what the kids, these are the different types of kids, so it was ages 8 to 10. We had a nice ethnically diverse sample. We had a nice diversity diversity and weight status, and also activity status. So some kids were very active, some kids were inactive. And we know that when we're dealing with kids, we really want to know, will these interventions work effectively in girls and boys? Will they work effectively in our kids who aren't getting as much physical activity, who aren't as fit, or who may be a little bit heavier? So what did we have them do? So on these 4 occasions that they came in on Saturdays for 8 hours, every 20 minutes, they got a 2-minute low intensity, moderate intensity, or high intensity activity break. For the low intensity, it was just basic stretching. We took out some yoga pads and had them just do some stretching, some downward dog for about 2 minutes, and they did 20 bursts throughout the day. For the moderate intensity activity at University of Michigan, we had a marching band student, so she would teach the kids how to march in place and just do cool moderate intensity activities. The high intensity activity were more like jumping jacks, or we would have little obstacle courses and kind of challenge the kids to keep their heart rates in this nice high zone. And we did it the kids would wear heart rate monitors throughout so that we would know if they were staying in their right intensity throughout each condition. And on the sedentary day, because we wanted to have a standardized control, is it the activity that the kids are enjoying, or is it the breaks or the interruptions? We had the kids play on little iPads, little fun and intellectual stimulating activities. And what we did to answer our food question and to answer our will they go home and be couch potatoes, we gave them standard meals throughout. So this is a little bit different than a natural experiment where you would just let them eat whatever. We actually standardized their food, and then when they went home for the next 3 days, they wore an activity monitor and they recorded their food for the next 3 days as well, after each condition. So this is the heart rate data, and this is just showing you that we had significantly different heart rates at each of these conditions. So great, we were at each of these activities there was some variability throughout the day, especially the moderate intensity. That's kind of hard to stay in this moderate zone because you're usually going really high or really low. But you can see that throughout each condition we had a nice difference in the intensity of exercise. So this was one of our best findings, I like, because Molly, again, she was the one interested in understanding about spontaneous activity. So if we give kids structured activity, will it change other activity? So let me orient you to this slide. These are the 4 different conditions. And the white bars are how much physical activity or how many calories they burned while they were in the lab. And then this is how many they wore the activity monitor home, how many calories did they burn when they left the lab. Okay, so in the compensation literature, what they say is that if a kid is compensating, meaning they're changing their behavior in terms of how much structured physical activity, they will actually go home and be couch potatoes, or they will change in another domain. You give them a lot of physical activity at school, they'll go home and they won't do much physical activity at all. So if these full bars are the total amount of physical activity, do you think that the kids were compensating or not? No, they are not. So we measured how many calories they normally burn outside of the experiments, but on a regular day, how many calories do they burn? And they were normally burning about 290 calories just in physical activity alone. And we can see, particularly in this high intensity day, they were getting about all of their physical activity in the lab, but then when they went home, they were still active. So that was very exciting for us. This also demonstrated over here that if you do have them sit all day, that they are getting less physical activity than they normally would if they had the option to be physically active. So when we look at this, we see that the kids were burning an additional 150 calories just as a function of physical activity. So that is pretty important. It seems kind of small, but the average individual, does anybody know how many calories we typically are overeating or under-exercising per day? Give me a guess.
1,500.
1,500? Just smaller than that?
300.
Smaller than that?
150?
A little bit less? Just a little. About 100. Good job, good guess though. Were you typically overeating? So they usually will say, stop, don't take those last couple of bites, because it's about 100 calories that we are overeating or under-exercising on a daily basis that then leads to weight gain. So this is just one day in the lab. But if kids continually burn an additional 100 calories a day, this may help with healthier weight trajectories over time. Okay, when we looked at their food intake, do you think that the kids overate, underate, or stayed the same? I got some stayed the same. Anybody think they overate? Underate? Good job, they stayed the same. So yeah, so when we calculated how many calories they were actually consuming, they, irrespective of intensity, they did not change how many calories they were consuming while they were in the lab or when they went home. And we gave them a big old, like 70% of their calories that they're supposed to eat to go home. It was like 2 dinners almost, to see if they would naturally on their own when we're not watching them, if they'd eat more calories, and they didn't. So on average, these kids are in a nice little energy deficit, meaning that they are burning more calories than they are they are burning more calories than they're consuming. And again, if we see this over time, this may be really helpful for kids who are having weight issues to just, again, get these small bursts of activity in throughout the day. Because we would likely never be able to get 40 minutes of continuous high intensity exercise out of some of our kids. That's just not feasible. But if we break it up, we may in fact actually be able to get some better health outcomes. And this is the data for the food intake in terms of, this is just one slide, but looking at their hunger throughout the day. So we had them answer little questionnaires right before they ate breakfast, right after they ate breakfast, right before they ate lunch, right after they ate lunch, and right before they went home with that big old dinner. And here you can see there's a nice W, because obviously if you eat something then you'll become less hungry. But the 4 different lines that we see are the different conditions, and we see no difference across the 4 different conditions in terms of how hungry they are, and we didn't see any changes in food intake too. So we were doing the happy dance in the lab, because at least these data are showing something in the positive direction. If we talk about how did the kids feel while they were exercising, so another question that we had, my student Matt Nagy, he was asking, well, will the kids feel good, feel bad, or feel horrible while they're doing these activity breaks, particularly when they're doing these high intensity activity breaks? So after every single activity break, we asked the kid on a scale of +5 to -5. +5 meaning I feel very good, 0 is neutral, -5 is feel very bad. On average, this is the sedentary condition, so of course they always felt awesome playing the video games. But as they are doing the intensity, this is low, moderate, and high. Yes, we see that it's lower during the high intensity condition, but all of the kids still felt good. So none of them reported, ooh, I feel horrible, or I feel bad, or I hate this, or even neutral. It was still in a positive zone in terms of how did they feel during the activity. Now, another important question that we wanted to answer was, well, how about our heavier kids? Our kids who typically really don't like high intensity activity, are they going to have issues in the classroom, or just issues doing this activity throughout the day? What we see here is that we, again, the same scale, if we just divide this by weight status, the normal weight kids or healthy weight kids, they were at about a 4 throughout, and they didn't really change. But look at our overweight and obese kids. They start a little bit lower at the beginning of the day, but you see this constant improvement throughout the day, which again, we were like, woohoo! Now what does that mean? For us, that meant that with each bout, if you look in the exercise psychology literature, they talk a lot about each time you are able to successfully complete an activity bout, it increases your confidence in order to be able to do another bout. So we believe that as these kids, although they don't typically do high intensity activity, that each time they did 2 minutes of jumping jacks with a little bit of music, having fun, and they actually enjoyed it and felt good, that the next time they did it, they felt better, they felt better, they felt better. So by the end of the day, they felt just as good as the kids who were at healthy weight. So again, this is just one day, but if we think about taking this throughout an academic semester, this may be another way to kind of infuse some higher intensity activity into kids' lives with them enjoying it and not hating it or rolling their eyes, getting extra sweaty, just having fun while moving. Okay, and this is nothing new. I'm talking to an audience who already knows this, and the CDC came out with this last year. But if you want to take home an infographic to the teachers and the principals at your school, this is probably the best. I quote this all the time. The more you burn, the more you learn. Because we know that with the more activity that they're doing, the more fit they are. Ben already talked about this a little bit, that the higher the test scores, there is a nice, strong relationship between the more activity, the greater the fitness, the better the academic achievement, the better the grades. So if we want to improve our test scores, we need to, again, try to infuse more physical activity. And I don't blame the schools and the principals. If we think about it, we too, when things get really hectic and busy and stressful, the last thing we say is, ooh, I need to go to the gym so I can focus more on this deadline. No, we don't. We usually cut out the gym, and so that we have more time to focus on the activity or the deadline that is due. So we just have to do a better job of saying, hey, if you actually go to the gym, or if you actually get some physical activity, that will help you be more focused to help you accomplish the task and meet the deadline that you have. And this is what we're trying to translate to the schools as well. So in speaking of academic performance, what did we find? So what we found was intensity does matter, and too much activity could potentially overstimulate these kids. So doing 20 activity breaks every 20 minutes, we know that's too much for the classroom, but we even have data to demonstrate that too. So if we look here, these are the data for, we had the kids take a math test, so it's a 40 question, 90-second math test. Just really basic math, really testing their speed, accuracy, and focus. And we had them answer it at the beginning of the day, midday, and end of day. Because different kids started out at different times, we looked at change scores throughout the day. And at the midday, we saw no difference in terms of math performance, but at the end of the day, we saw a nice significant decrease in math performance. So to us, that said 20 activity breaks is too much. We're able to actually stabilize math performance throughout the day, but you do see this sharp decline by the end of the day. Now we do know that cognition is higher in the morning, so the kids will come in nice and alert, and you will probably see the highest math scores first thing in the morning, and as the kids continue throughout the day, they'll decrease. So we actually said that this was a bonus because we were actually able to see a maintenance of math performance throughout the morning, but it didn't sustain throughout the end of the day. So now we have data in terms of physical activity, in terms of weight management, in terms of math performance, in terms of enjoyment. So hopefully this is some nice information to help you go back to your schools and tell your teachers all the wonderful benefits of doing this. But this is what most of your teachers will respond to. Yeah, that's great. Yes, we can get the kids moving, but my classroom is going to look like this if I don't figure out a way to manage them. I'm going to get 40 kids up all at the same time. They're going to love the activity too much, and how am I going to be able to bring them back down so that they can refocus on work? That is the number one. Number two, first one is space. Number two is classroom management in terms of getting physical activity breaks into the classroom. And so that's where InPACT comes in, is that we wanted to test the idea of putting these short bursts of activity. Most of the activity break interventions, like Take 10, it's usually just one 10-minute continuous bout. But we wanted to try to get more, almost 10 bouts. Can we get 10 bouts? We know we can't get 20. And the teacher said, well, we'll try 10. And we tried it at 3 different schools. So what can we, and just extend it, maybe not 2 minutes, but 3 minutes, because we're supposed to get about 30 minutes of physical activity at school. Can we get it all in the classroom? Ben, come on up and tell us what we did. Oh, let's first watch a little video to give you a little insight as to what InPACT is all about. Today, nearly 1 in 3 kids in the state of Michigan are already overweight or obese. That is astounding.
We know that students are losing valuable opportunities to be physically active throughout the school day in favor of additional instructional time.
But there are innovative ways in which we can infuse physical activity in the curriculum.
I think it's time for a movement break.
InPACT is designed to incorporate 10 3-minute activity breaks right into the teacher's existing lessons.
Can you please close your Chromebooks and find your space?
It's too easy not to do.
Physical activity is vital to the learning process. When a student sits for as little as 10 minutes, the brain actually starts to shut down, and that has huge implications on their ability to learn.
We've reintroduced the idea of fun and being active together.
They love to do this. They get so excited to move and to dance and to exercise. It's the best part of our day.
With any transition, the more explicit instruction you give for that transition, the more the students are going to follow it. And so we had transition times as little as 3 seconds. We had transition times that exceeded a couple minutes. And so we work with that. That's part of our training is the classroom management, having them practice the routines of just simple as standing up, pushing your chairs in without making any noise, finding your space without touching anybody else. Because if you just say, all right, stand up, go to your spots, what are you going to see? What are you going to hear? You're probably going to have tables moving, chairs being knocked down, elbows flying all over the place. And so it's really, really important that we work with our teachers to kind of practice those transitions. And like I said, we had transition times as little as 3 seconds, meaning the class was up out of the seats and in their spots in a 1, 2, 3 count. On-task behavior after an activity break. So our research showed that 99% of students were on task within 30 seconds following the physical activity break. So we talk about re-engaging the brain and learning process. 99% of the students were on task 30 seconds after the break. Did the children enjoy their physical activity breaks? Overwhelmingly, yes. And in fact, once the intervention was technically over, we heard from teachers, and they skip a break. Oh, there's an assembly this afternoon, and the kids would obviously be disappointed that they were missing out on their physical activity breaks. And we understand that with the daily schedule, it gets a little hectic, and sometimes teachers forget. The longer students were in this program, the better they were at reminding their teachers that they were about to forget. And so, did the children perform the activity breaks at the right intensity? The answer was yes. So we had them wear a heart rate monitor, and that was really cool because it could be broadcast up onto the screen, and so students got immediate feedback as far as what their heart rate was and if they're exercising at the appropriate intensity. And these are the 3 schools that we tried it in. This was last year, and in Columbia, which is a rural, Columbia's in the house today somewhere. Estabrook also in the house, and Anderson Elementary. And so this we did with 3rd through 6th grade. The one thing that we would talk with you guys is the biggest thing we found when it went up to the 6th grade level is obviously students switching from classroom to classroom, and so that added a little bit of difficulty, but if the whole school's doing it, then it alleviates that issue. So the resources. So we have a teacher manual, we have a compendium of 220-ish physical activity break ideas, and all of these resources are on the PHS portal. Parent information, share with parents why we're doing this, why it's important, how it helps their students health-wise and academic-wise. Our School of Architecture friends created 8 different instructional videos that are also up on the portal for teachers to follow along to. That is kind of the one thing with teachers kind of starting this that we found is that they really like the videos, and there's a million different videos on the web as well, but teachers just kind of like the ease of just popping up the video and students following along to it. But we do provide the 200 different compendium of activities, which is wonderful. I feel it's a good enrichment project for students as well. It's also a good motivating tool if you allow students to kind of pick. If they finish an assignment early, all right, look through, find one of these that you can lead the class through. And so there are a lot of those as well, broken down into different categories as well. So these are all the resources that are provided. Usually our teacher training, last year was a 2-day teacher training. Don't think it's probably quite necessary. Really the biggest thing is getting your teachers to understand why this is important, how it's going to help them, how it's going to help their students, and then really working on the transitions and the management aspect, which there's a lot of resources in our teacher manual for that as well. So here's the 2-day workshop. Here's when we had 10. This is just kind of our ramped up protocol, 1 break a day, 2 breaks a day, 3 breaks a day. We've kind of modified this now to be more reflective. When we started in the winter with our school, we're gonna just do 5 breaks a day for 4 minutes. Here's that heart rate monitoring I was referring to earlier. So you could see that when the kids had the monitor on, they could see the immediate feedback and kind of compare themselves to their friends, and that was a great motivating tool. But we also worked with the teachers to teach the students how to take their own pulse and calculate their heart rate. And we have classroom posters that students can refer to see if they're exercising in the correct zone. And the nice thing about the manual way to do it is that was a great management piece, because talk about getting a group of students who are just exercising to quiet down, it'll happen like that. They love it. So asking them to find their pulse, count their heart rate for a 10 to 15 second count was an awesome way to get the kids quieted down and return to their seats in an orderly manner as they counted out their heart rate.
So this is just a picture to put some graphics to the words that Ben just talked about, is that we noticed that the teachers, because a lot of the videos, again, they overwhelmingly love the videos as opposed to the compendiums. The compendium were great, and they might be good for things like the kids can take the activity book home and maybe try a couple of activities to do at home on their own. Question.
What's the compendium?
Yes.
What is that?
A compendium. The compendium was the 220 activity breaks that our students in the lab put a heart rate monitor on and tried them themselves. The first go around, we realized we need to adjust the intensity a bit, because those were great for 8-year-olds to do, but not so much for us 30-something, 40-something, 50-something folks who have to implement, because we wanted our teachers to do the activity breaks with the students. So this year we have put modifications into to that, and your teachers will get it on Wednesday. But the teachers really liked the videos, and they said, well, instead of having 10 activity breaks, how about we do 5 activity breaks and just make them a little bit longer? So 5 times 4, we're getting 20 minutes in the classroom. That's still really, really good. And if you look at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's recommendations, they say that classrooms should try to achieve to get 19 minutes of physical activity. So we're right there at where we should in having a comprehensive physical activity program. We want the kids to totally get 60 minutes. They can get a third of it in the classroom. That is great. Another thing that Ben mentioned is that classroom management really dictated the transition time on these activity breaks, and that was another potential barrier that could keep a teacher from doing 2 activity breaks versus 5 activity breaks. If it takes you 2 or 3 minutes to get those kids up and get them back down, that 4-minute activity break just turned into a 10-minute activity break, and multiply that by 5, and that wasn't going to go very well. But we had, when the teachers did practice their classroom management, there was one teacher, she even gave an activity break during a math test. 2 seconds. Kids get up, put on the video, did it. Kids went back down, finished their math test. I mean, I expected buy-in, but not that much buy-in. I think during the transition times is just fine. But she really believed in the power of, hey, the kids might, this is a long test, the kids might be losing focus, so let's get them up, do a little activity so that they can refocus and do well on this exam. Other things, as Ben already said, 99% of the kids were back on task. So we had our research assistants go in and actually directly observe the activity breaks and actually count. From the time that the teacher says, okay, it's time to sit back down, 30 seconds, how many of scanning the room, how many of the kids were actually on task? And both boys and girls were on task. When we wanted to see what intensity, because again, intensity matters, and we were trying to promote health-enhancing physical activity in the classroom, when our students did the scans, they saw 85% of the time the kids were at a moderate to vigorous intensity, which is great. And even the teachers were doing, we asked them to do the activity breaks, we asked them to role model, and 75% of the time they were doing it as well. Now whether or not the teacher did the activity break, we were thinking in our heads that yes, if the teacher does it, it'll be great role modeling, and then the students will be more engaged in doing it. That was true, but we also had some cases where we saw the teacher with the lowest participation, she actually had the highest participation in their kids. Why do you think that is? She didn't really do it, but her kids were totally doing. What do you think she was doing to get her kids to move at the right intensity? She was encouraging them. So even though she was not actually engaging, she was going around clapping. Good job, Johnny. Good job, Sally. Keep it up. 2 more minutes, 1 more minute. And so that was another thing that we learned in this intervention, that of course we would love the adults to also get, because you can almost consider this to be a workplace wellness program, because adults only need 30 minutes of physical activity, so they could get 20 minutes, and then you only have to park your car farther, 10 more minutes to walk to your car, you're done for the day. And I realized that when we were filming that commercial with the kids, they were exercising all day, and I hadn't done anything. I was just watching people exercise, and I said, shoot, I should have done an activity break with them. But yeah, how can we infuse physical activity? One of the things that we run into is that physical activity is always an add-on in most of our lives. But back in the day, we used to have it infused into our lives. So can we do that again? And like Ben said, yes, the kids definitely enjoyed this. And if you could see the little notes they wrote on there, we love the activity breaks. The kids would go home, they would find the videos online, they would do it at home, in addition to what they were doing in the classroom. Before I got here, somebody mentioned something about parent involvement, and I think that is huge, because one of our parents, who shall remain nameless, their kid was always wanting to go home and do the activity break and do the activity break with them. But then the parent came to the teacher and said, can you not do so much activity? Because I really don't want to be active with my kids. So we, like, wait, what? So we were thinking, okay, now we need to develop a parent component too, so that even if the parents aren't doing it, will they at least encourage their kids to be physically active at home? So one of the grants that we're working on now is, can we have InPACT homework? The cool thing about this being a technology screen-based, since we used a lot of the videos instead of developing curriculum, is that the kids can go home and do this on their own. So can we get, they do 1 or 2 videos at home, maybe they'll get an extra 10 minutes at home. They may not have a safe place to walk to get home, but everybody has a living room. You know, just let mom and dad, can we move the dinner table out of the way real quick, do a quick little activity break and infuse a little more activity into the home. Okay, so quotes from the participating teachers. The teachers definitely enjoyed this as well. Kids are enjoying them and getting accustomed to them in our routine and understanding how to focus afterwards. That was probably the biggest benefit that the teachers saw, is that they really visually could see the kids were focusing more with the activity breaks. The students were enthusiastic about the breaks and were looking forward to them. If, oops, you ran out of time, the kids would say, where's my activity break? Which was great for us, because the students would then encourage the teachers to do it rather than us coming in and saying, did you do your activity break today? Students were engaged afterward and look forward to the activity breaks. It gave them an outlet, particularly on rainy days. We're moving into the winter season, so how can we keep our kids active even when they can't go outside as much? And again, the students were more able to focus. Now, one thing that we did notice, so full disclosure, is that we did not have equal implementation throughout the entire program. Although on average, across the 20 classrooms, we were able to get about 5 activity breaks into a classroom. Some teachers were only able to get in 1. Some teachers were able to get in 8, 9, even 10 at some times. So what we noticed was, and this was from some of my students, is that even though we gave the same professional development, we had the same resources, so everybody had access to those resources, but we had differing levels of implementation. And this is a problem across all types of interventions or programs like this. They just don't really report it. But what we did not want to do is give more activity to the really active kids, and then the kids who needed it the most are the ones who you had half implementation. And so we even saw differences in transition time. Some schools, one teacher, she was able to get 2-second transition times. Another school, the maximum was 5 minutes. 5 minutes to transition the kids, plus the 5 minutes plus for the activity, much less likely to engage in these activities. So again, we're giving the same intervention, but different outcomes. So the amount of physical activity these kids were getting differed by school. So this is something that we were very much interested in trying to understand why. So some of the questions that we asked were in terms of barriers to it. So what was preventing certain teachers from being able to fully implement this intervention versus others that just took it and ran with it? And one was definitely principal involvement. So we had some principals that came to the teacher training, really encouraged their teachers to get involved and to do the activity breaks. Others and others did not. One of the schools, the principal didn't even know until we were there with the filming crew that we were even in his school. So for teacher turnover, we said because this is very interesting. Again, I'm an exercise physiologist. I don't know these things. But for teacher turnover was very important. We had one teacher, we had some schools where the teachers had been there for 20 years. And then we had other schools where the teachers had been there for maybe 2 or 3, and there was just a lot of turnover. And so that affected the interactions with the kids. Classroom management also was important. So again, some of the teachers felt that they really were able to manage their kids, and this was not just based on school, but based on the actual classroom. Because we had some teachers specific at like Estabrook, we had one teacher, she was able to get in 8 activity breaks every day. She was awesome. And she said her kids loved it, and she had just a lot of resources. But again, a lot of the schools felt very pressed for time to get instructional time into their school day. There was still that time crunch that they felt across all of the different schools in terms of were they able to really get in all of these different activity breaks. And one thing we noticed, particularly in some of our schools, is that we had really high teacher stress and high student stress. So if you have stressed out kids, yes, they like to be active, but stressed out kids are not learning as well. The teachers, if they're really stressed out, this is just one more thing that's on their plate to do. And so again, how can we work with the teachers, work with the principals to say that this is a great thing for everyone to get involved with? Even if we can't get in 5 activity breaks a day, can we get in 1 or 2? Yes, you can. Go for it.
Okay, you just answered.
No, what? Ask it.
No, just one, doing the activity breaks reduce the stress for the teacher, reduce the stress for the students, because kids are stressed out. And so when they do exercise, it reduces the stress. Like that cortisol level actually comes down.
Yeah.
So it's funny, what my best performing teacher in the entire building, and everyone raves about how well she performs, constantly takes her kids for walks up and down the stairs, up and down, and then back up to the room. And people are like, why? People are like, why are you in the hallway? Principals ask her, why is she in the hallway? Stuff like that. She goes and giving them an activity break, and then she comes back to the classroom and goes about her busy work, and she's getting the best results in the entire school.
Yeah.
So doesn't it reduce to exercise?
That is a great point. So data from the laboratory has demonstrated because you can actually induce a stressor, and we do this all the time in schools, but you can actually induce a stressor in a kid or an adult. So if you have somebody, the most stressful thing that people do is standing up to give an oral presentation. Like my cortisol levels are through the roof right now. Or if you have them do a math test to where in the audience is, a little stern and asking you to hurry up and make those math calculations very quickly, you can also induce a stress response in children and adults. What they did in the lab is that you would induce a stressor in kids, and then you would give them physical activity versus induce a stressor and not give them physical activity. Or vice versa, give them physical activity and then induce a stressor. So pretend like you're walking to school, and then pretend like you're riding the bus, and then induce a stressor. And they definitely saw that yes, cortisol goes up with exercise, but in terms of during the stress condition, that their cortisols were much lower. They had a dampened biological stress response as a function of doing exercise first. So one of the questions that we want to ask is not just doing 30 minutes first thing in the morning, but if we infuse these bursts of activity throughout the day, can you help them control their stress response, both biologically and perceptually? So if the kids feel, you're really stressed out, but then you turn on Estabrook Love, Justin Bieber Power. You turn that video on, do it real quick, kids are in a good mood, they're ready to learn. Maybe hopefully we can reduce stress. And actually at your school this year we are monitoring stress, pre, mid, and post, and emotion management throughout the day. So just as we ask the kids, how do you feel? We'll be asking them that in their classroom, about the kids doing the activity breaks and not, how do you feel? And does that change as a function of these activity breaks? So what we are trying to do moving forward is, again, develop more of an equity approach. So different schools, different teachers have different levels of resources. We did not see universal, every school, every classroom had the exact same implementation. It varied by school and it varied by teacher. Okay, and so what we're doing now, or we're applying for funding to also look at different resources, talking to principals, talking to teachers. Why was this easy for you, or how is this difficult for you? And how can we make sure that all of the kids are getting the same amount of physical activity? Or if we need to, if we're dealing with a community that has high stress, can we give them double resources that then affect both stress reduction and physical activity, or anything else that the kids are dealing with. When we spoke with the principal at Waima and Wyke High, she also mentioned, how do we incorporate social emotional learning into these activity breaks? So these are some of the things that we're looking to improve as we move forward. Okay, so this is where Ben comes back to tell you about the curriculum piece, because we did notice one thing that we want to work on is that although the teachers loved the videos and they loved the activity breaks, it was still an interruption to class time. But is there a way in which we can meld those two things together? Can we infuse the curriculum into the actual activity break so that the kids are moving and learning simultaneously? And Ben's going to tell you what our colleagues in the School of Education is working on.
All right, so we're actually going to go ahead and give this a quick try. I'm not a science teacher, but I'm going to do my best. So if we're doing a lesson on states of matter, how many different states of matter are there? 3. Is there 4? I don't know. I know 3, all right? Plasma. Okay, we'll do 4. I like that. So if you're doing a lesson on states of matter, everybody go ahead and stand up for me. So we have solid, liquid, gas, plasma, right? So of those 4, if you're a particle of that matter, which one would you move the fastest? Which particles move the fastest? Gas, right? All right, which would move the slowest? Solid. All right, and then we have plasma and liquid. Between plasma and liquid, which one's going to move faster? All right. I would say liquid too, right? Plasma, to me, like plasma in your blood is like thicker. All right, so right now, so you've talked about the different states of matter, and now you're going to have your students move around the room without touching anybody else or anything, all right? I would like you to now pretend that you are a solid. Go ahead and move as you would be a particle in solid. Yeah, so you're not moving very fast, right? You're just kind of staying in one spot and kind of shaking as a solid. All right, now you're a gas. So now you're going to move around the room a little faster. Yes, there we go. All right, and now you are a solid. Liquid. So not quite as fast as a gas, right? We're moving around. And now you're a plasma. So you're going to move just slightly slower. And now to get those heart rates moving, now you're back to being a gas. Go ahead and move around as a gas. Moving throughout the room. There we go. And you may return to your seats. So that's kind of what we're working on, our friends at the School of Ed on, is trying to figure out ways to actually incorporate movement into the grade level content expectations of what teachers are already supposed to be teaching. And so right now we're currently working on developing these lessons, and we're at a point where we're working on 3rd through 6th grade math and science lessons. And so here's an example of a 3rd grade about tug of war. So they're doing a lesson on making predictions. And so this group, they're going to do different games of tug of war and make predictions about it. So if you have a group of adults on one side versus a group of kids on another side, and they're going to make a prediction and then actually carry out and see what happens. If you have 14 kids over here but only 6 over here, what do you think is going to happen? If you have 12 on this side and you have 12 on this side, what do you think is going to happen? And so making predictions, but then using tug of war and some physical activity and movement to carry out those predictions and do a little data collection. All right, and so that's what we see here. And so we're also working on trying to create, because as Rebecca said, teachers love the videos, and so we're working with our friends at architecture to create a video just as what we just did there. So putting up a particle in a liquid state and then having students follow to the video throughout the room as a liquid. So more instructional videos and more content level expectation lessons as well. All right, so the compounding benefits of physical activity over a lifetime, a graphic just on the benefits of being physically active starting in childhood. Research shows that students who are overweight as a child will more than likely be overweight as an adult. So it's important to work with our students at where they're at, and so they will start to see the benefits of being physically active. So less likely to be obese, smaller gains in BMI, higher test scores. There was a big article that just came out of the CDC about less likely to engage in risky behaviors the healthier they are. It's new research that just came out to reinforce that. More likely to go to college, earn more throughout the course of their life, less healthcare costs, higher wages due to less absenteeism, more promotions, things like that. Reduced risk of heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes. So just some of our funders. So we're funded through the Momentum Center, Michigan M Cubed. Acknowledge our partners who are not here. But once again, all of these resources are on our PHS portal. If you have specific questions, you can certainly ask us or email us if you're interested in a little bit more support as you try to implement this on your own campuses.